I was in my final year of studying biochemistry, burning the midnight oil to keep my grades up and secure a spot in a prestigious research program. My sister and I shared an apartment with two other girls, trying to save money and support each other through the stress of university life. Next door to us lived five girls. Three of them we knew from our old dorm days, and two were newcomers. The older ones were cool, but man, those new girls were something else. Messy, loud, and with a knack for borrowing things without asking. One day, things came to a head. My sister and one of our roommates confronted the girls next door about some missing clothes and kitchen stuff. I stayed out of it, hoping to keep the peace, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife after that. A few nights later, I dragged myself home after a brutal study session at the library. My face felt like it was on fire, and my tooth was throbbing so bad I could barely think straight. Tears were streaming down my face as I stumbled into our apartment. My roommate, bless her heart, saw my state and immediately tried to help. She ran next door to ask for some painkillers. I heard the conversation through our thin walls. My roommate politely apologized for the late disturbance and explained that her friend was in severe pain. She asked if they had any painkillers to spare. The new girl replied that she did have painkillers, but she refused to give them. When my roommate asked why, the new girl explained that it was because my sister had gotten into an argument with her roommates, so she wouldn't give me any painkillers. Who refuses to help someone in pain over a petty argument they weren't even part of? I spent that night in agony, cursing that girl's callousness between sobs. Fast forward a few days and I found myself home alone late at night. The doorbell rang and when I opened it, there stood Miss No Painkillers for You herself. She looked like she'd been through the ringer, all frazzled and desperate. The new girl apologized and hesitantly explained her predicament. Her charger had died, she had a final exam the next morning and a submission due that night. She had just started preparing and knew I had a similar charger. She asked if she could borrow mine. Part of me wanted to help, to be the bigger person. But another part, the part still smarting from that sleepless night of pain, had other ideas. I told her no, claiming I was using it right now. Then I shut the door in her face. The next morning I woke up feeling a little guilty. I decided to head over to their apartment and offer my charger, figuring she probably had a rough night. When I knocked, one of the other girls answered. She looked exhausted. I asked if her roommate was around, explaining that I wanted to lend her my charger for her exam. The other girl told me that I had just missed her, as she had left for her exam about 10 minutes ago. I then inquired if she had managed to finish her work the previous night. The other girl replied that she had barely finished, having to write her paper by hand all night because her laptop had died. She described it as a mess. I felt a twinge of satisfaction mixed with a hint of remorse. When I turned to leave, the girl called out to me. She asked me to wait and then mentioned that she had heard about the painkiller incident from the other night. She acknowledged that it wasn't cool of her roommate and told me that they had talked about it. She added that her roommate felt really bad and was planning to apologize after her exam. I nodded, not sure how to respond. Later that day, I left my charger and a note at their door. For future emergencies, good luck on your exam. It wasn't a full olive branch, but it was a start. From that day on, things between our apartments slowly improved. We never became best friends, but we learned to coexist. Breaking the cycle of pettiness is not always easy, but it sure makes for a more peaceful living situation. A few months ago, when I moved into a new neighborhood, I was working in IT security, so I'm big on privacy and safety. And that's why I installed a top-notch security system in my new place. Cameras, alarms, the works. Everything was going fine until I met my neighbor. Let's just call her Karen. At first, she seemed nice enough, always waving and smiling, but then things started getting weird. She'd show up at my door at odd hours asking for sugar or to borrow tools. I tried to be polite, but I could tell something was off. One day, I was working on my motorcycle in the driveway when Karen came over. She greeted me cheerfully and asked what I was doing. I explained I was just doing some maintenance on my bike. Karen then enthusiastically mentioned she'd always wanted to learn how to ride and asked if I could teach her sometime. I didn't really want to, but I tried to be nice about it. I gently suggested that riding wasn't something you could learn in a day and recommended she look into some classes instead. Karen didn't take the hint and insisted I could teach her right then and there, calling me a party pooper for refusing. She actually tried to climb onto my bike. I had to physically stop her. I told her that it wasn't safe and asked her not to touch my motorcycle. Karen responded by accusing me of being selfish, saying that neighbors were supposed to help each other out. Things escalated from there. She started spreading rumors about me in the neighborhood, saying I was unfriendly and antisocial. Then she began complaining about the noise from my motorcycle, even though I always followed noise ordinances. The situation came to a head when I caught her trying to slash my bike's tires. I confronted her, and she went ballistic. She started screaming and swinging a knife around. My friend CJ, who was visiting at the time, tried to calm her down and got his arm slashed in the process. I called the police and Karen was arrested. That's when I learned she had a history of this kind of behavior. She'd been harassing other neighbors too, but everyone was too scared to speak up. While all this was going on, I met my girlfriend Yue. She's amazing, smart, kind, and understanding. She knew about the whole Karen situation and was really supportive. I had a motorcycle trip planned with some buddies, a cross-country adventure we'd been planning for months. Yue was cool with it, even though we'd just started dating. She's independent like that. While I was gone, Yue started checking in on Karen's kid. He's 19, but with his mom in jail, she wanted to make sure he was okay. She'd drop off food, keeping her distance to be safe. Then, in the middle of my trip, I got a frantic call from Yue. It was the middle of the night, and Karen's kid was at our door, acting weird and saying he loved Yue. She was scared and didn't know what to do. I turned my bike around and rode nonstop for 29 hours to get home. When I arrived, I found out the police had shown up and tried to force their way into our house. They wanted access to my security system, probably because the footage made them look bad for not helping Karen's kid. When I got home, Yue told me how scared she had been. She explained that the police kept demanding access to the safe with the hard drives, but she didn't know the combination. I reassured her that she had done the right thing and promised we would sort it out. Now we're on our way to meet with the Citizens Investigation Unit to hand over the footage. I've got to find a lawyer to deal with the police overstepping their bounds. Karen has been denied bail and is getting psychiatric help. It's probably for the best. Her kid is staying with relatives now, getting the support he needs. Yue and I are taking some time off to decompress from all this craziness. We're heading up north for a little vacation. After everything that's happened, we need some time to ourselves. You see, some people collect stamps or vintage cars, but for me, it's all about mastering different fighting styles. You could say I'm obsessed, and you wouldn't be wrong. One evening, my buddy and I decided to grab some beer and snacks from the local superstore. I was wearing my usual workout gear, a blue muscle shirt with a long-sleeved underlayer and baggy shorts. We were scanning the beer aisle when I spotted our favorite brand hidden behind a pallet jack, loaded with boxes. Wanting to get to our beer, I started pushing the pallet jack out of the way. That's when I heard it, the sound of angry footsteps coming down the aisle. I turned to see a woman in a flowing pantsuit, complete with a white belt and chunky high heels. She was wearing pearls, which, in my experience, is never a good sign in a place like this. The woman rudely demanded that I, thinking I was a worker, help her find things for her garden party. I told her off, explaining that I wasn't her servant and didn't know what her problem was. She walked right up to me, jabbing her finger into my chest. She scolded me for addressing her as lady and threatened to talk to my manager, saying she might let me keep my job if I performed to her satisfaction. I muttered whatever and tried to turn away, but she wasn't done. She yelled at me for daring to walk away from her. She grabbed my shoulder, her nails digging through my shirt and into my skin. Years of martial arts training kicked in, and before I knew it, I had twisted and thrown her over my shoulder. She landed hard on the floor, her arm hitting the boxes on the pallet jack. She let out a scream that sounded like a mix between a steam whistle and a drunk frat boy. The two managers came running up, demanding to know what happened. My friend stepped in to explain. My friend described the situation to the managers, telling them how the woman had demanded I help her, poked me when I refused, and grabbed me from behind when I tried to leave. One of the managers called for an ambulance and the police. Soon, cops arrived and started questioning us separately. I gave my statement, explaining how she had assaulted me first, and I had reacted instinctively. While I was talking to the police, EMTs arrived and took the woman away on a stretcher. I could hear one of the cops mentioning something about checking the security cameras. After what felt like hours of questioning, the police finally let me go. They took my contact information and said they'd be in touch within a few days. I met up with my friend, who had been waiting for me at the sandwich shop near the exit. We ended up buying our beer and snacks anyway. Priorities, right? But I kind of felt anxious, though, about what might happen next. Would I get in trouble for defending myself? Would that entitled woman try to sue me? My friend tried to lighten the mood by joking that maybe he should be the one to go to the store next time since I seemed to attract too much excitement. I laughed, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Who knew a simple trip to buy beer could turn into such a mess? All because someone couldn't be bothered to treat others with basic respect. The next few days were tense as I waited for the police to contact me. I kept replaying the incident in my mind, wondering if I could have handled it differently. But every time I came to the same conclusion. I had reacted to protect myself from someone who was assaulting me. Finally, I got the call. The officer on the phone told me that they had reviewed the security footage and interviewed witnesses. To my relief, they confirmed that I had acted in self-defense and wouldn't be facing any charges. Even better, they told me that the woman, let's call her Karen, was being charged with assault and disorderly conduct. Apparently, this wasn't her first run-in with the law for similar behavior. My friend called shortly after I got the news. He told me he had heard from the cops and that I was off the hook. He even joked that maybe next time I'd think twice before trying to move a pallet jack for beer. I laughed and quipped that maybe I'd just wear a shirt that says, "Not an employee," in big letters. My friend suggested we should just stick to the corner store from now on, as there'd be less chance of running into entitled Karens there. We had a good laugh about it and just hung up. Honestly, I'm just glad my martial arts training came in handy for something other than staying fit. I grew up in Belgium. My father, a hard-working man who'd built his own successful business from the ground up, shared his passion with me. He taught me everything I knew about cars, from the inner workings of engines to the subtle differences between makes and models. So when it came time for him to buy a new car, I was thrilled to be part of the process. It was about 25 years ago, and I was in my late teens. Dad had been driving the same reliable sedan for over a decade, and he felt it was time for an upgrade. We spent weekends visiting local dealerships, test driving various models, and discussing the pros and cons of each. It was during one of these outings that we stumbled upon a dealership showcasing the brand new Citroën C5. The moment we laid eyes on it, I could see the spark in my father's eyes. The C5 was sleek, modern, and packed with features that were impressive for its time. We took it for a test drive, and I could tell Dad was smitten. However, being the practical man he was, he had some reservations. After we returned to the dealership, Dad approached the owner, who was also acting as the salesperson that day. Dad expressed his love for the car, praising its drive and features, but he also voiced his concern about the visibility when parking, mentioning that the nose dropped quite a bit towards the front, which might make it tricky to judge distances. I watched as the owner's expression changed from one of smug satisfaction to barely concealed annoyance. The owner responded with a condescending tone, suggesting that if Dad couldn't park, he should buy a Mercedes, as they have a sight on the front. His tone was condescending, and I could see my father's demeanor shift instantly. Dad had always taught me about the importance of respect and good customer service, and this man had just failed on both counts. Dad calmly replied that his father had always taught him to accept good advice when it's given, and thanked the owner for his time. Without another word, we walked out, leaving the owner standing there with his mouth agape. Over the next couple of weeks, we continued our search, but nothing quite measured up to the C5 in terms of features and price. Dad didn't seem too bothered, though. He always said, "The right car will come along when it's meant to." And, as fate would have it, he was right. About 2 weeks after the Citroën incident, we ran into an old friend of his at a local cafe. As they caught up, the conversation turned to cars. The friend mentioned that he had bought a Mercedes C-Class a few months back, but it wasn't quite what he expected, being a bit too big for his needs. I saw my father's eyes light up, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. Dad asked if his friend would consider selling the car. What followed was a conversation that seemed almost too good to be true. His friend was eager to sell, and the price he offered was well below market value. It was as if the stars had aligned perfectly. Within a week, the paperwork was completed, and the Mercedes was ours. As we drove home in our new car, Dad turned to me with a grin and suggested we pay our friend at the Citroën dealership a visit. The next morning, we drove to the dealership, the Mercedes gleaming in the sunlight. We walked in and asked to speak to the manager. As we waited, I could feel the excitement building in my chest. When the owner emerged from his office, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, followed by that same arrogant smile we'd seen before. The owner welcomed us back, asking if we had reconsidered the C5. Dad explained that we were there to thank him for his advice, reminding him that during our last visit, he had suggested buying a Mercedes if Dad couldn't park the C5. The owner's smile widened, clearly thinking he was about to make a sale. He eagerly asked if we wanted to discuss the C5's price. Dad calmly replied that it wouldn't be necessary, as he had taken the owner's advice to heart and bought a Mercedes. With that, Dad gestured towards the window where the C-Class was parked prominently in front of the dealership. The owner's jaw dropped, his face cycling through a range of emotions: confusion, realization, and finally, embarrassment. Dad thanked the owner once more for his excellent advice, remarking that it's not often you find such honest salesmanship these days. Without waiting for a response, we turned and walked out, leaving the owner standing there, speechless for the second time. And when we cruised down the highway in our new Mercedes, I knew this was a story I'd be telling for years to come.